What if I told you that knowing your type of ego doesn't just change how you see the world, it also changes how you move within it, unlocking your highest potential? I've been thinking a lot about what the ego really means, looking at different perspectives from psychologists, philosophers, and even religions, and everyone seems to give a different answer. But do you know what surprised me the most? That a soccer series could treat a subject as complex as the ego with such precision. That series is Blue Lock. Blue Lock shows that figuring out your type of ego isn't just useful for self-knowledge, but it can be the difference between getting stuck and reaching your full potential. That's exactly what Isaki Yoichi discovers in the final of the Neo Egoist League, when PXG faces Boston München. In that match, we see Isagi stunned after Shiro scores a goal born from his chemical reaction with Charles. Isagi asks himself, how those two players make that connection so fast, almost unreal? And then a single question shifts everything. How does each player actually find their way to the goal? He notices a clear split. Some people chase their goal for themselves, driven by their style, impulses, and their pure pleasure. Isagi labels this pattern as self-styled ego, and Shiro is the perfect example. Others aim at a different target. They chase value for the world. They adopt the world standards as trophies, metrics, the kind of performance society rewards as their compass. Because of that, they become very good at reading the environment and doing whatever the situation calls for, even if it's not what they personally enjoy. Isagi calls that a world-style ego. When he sees that distinction, Isagi begins to anticipate moves across the pitch. Take Kunigami. Isagi knows Kunigami holds a deep resentment towards Shiro because Shiro eliminated him from Blue Lock. With that in mind, Isagi predicts Kunigami's tendencies and uses them to his advantage, turning Kunigami into a critical piece for his first goal. In short, Kunigami acts from a self-styled ego and Isagi operates from a world-style ego. But those two labels don't explain everything. During the draw between Master München and PXG, Michael Kaiser ends up in a brutal spot. The players who used to make him shine are gone, replaced by teammates who don't play for him, and some of them only play for Isagi. With just Ness left as last option, he begins to force desperate plays, in which, little by little, he feels mentally cornered as his past insecurities return. Yet, that pressure doesn't break him. Instead, it forces a reset. Kaiser accepts his shadow, strips away pride, and begins to play more rationally, even with teammates he never expected to cooperate with. And from that reset, he created one of his most powerful goals. Isagi at first can make sense of how could Kaiser produce his best output in such a restricted environment, but then Isagi overhears Kaiser's talk with Ness. Kaiser admits he doesn't need Ness anymore, and it clicks. Kaiser reaches his peak when he's under restriction. Limits push him harder than the freedom ever could. That insight is the missing piece in Isagi's analytic framework, the piece that helps him design a plan to win the Neo Egoist League. Here's the core idea. It's not enough to know someone's style. You also need to know the conditions where they thrive. Some people, like Kaiser, flow better with constraints that channel or force them to push. That's a restricted ego. Others, like Isagi, perform best when given autonomy, space to improvise and think. That's a free ego. This ties directly to Desi and Raya's self-determination theory. Free egos depends on autonomy and competence. They do best when they can choose and feel effective. Restricted egos, by contrast, often grow inside structures that direct their energy and challenge their skills. With that in mind, Isagi builds his secret weapon for ego types that define not only what someone chases, but how they get to the best self. That clarity lets him score the decisive goal, because he not only knew how to exploit his freedom to analyze and create, he also understood how to give Kaiser the space so that he could play in collaboration with him and at the same time give him the freedom he needs so he can reach his full potential. This doesn't just show that Isagi didn't win only by luck. It proves that he built his victory on an analysis so deep that no one else reached it, and that insight gave birth to a framework that defines the 4 types of ego. Let's begin with the free world style ego. This is the person who chases their goal by generating value for the world. They focus on what the world values most and shape their actions around those standards to reach their goal. They're deeply aware of their environment, constantly reading what's happening around them and using every detail to tilt the balance in their favor. And when they're free, they reach their best performance because freedom allows them to improvise and act with autonomy. Sagi Yoichi is a clear example of this. From the very beginning, we saw that raw physical strength wasn't his thing. His weapon is vision. In every match, he reads the field, analyzes every player, and creates opportunities that, even if they aren't personally satisfying to him, he knows the world will recognize and value. But most importantly, his best version always emerges in free environments, where he's given enough space to analyze and create plays that lead him to victory. Another case is Ryo Mikage. His gift is the ability to copy the style of both his allies and his rival for his own benefit. That ability forces him to stay hyper-aware of everything that happens on the field and to use his copy skill at the exact moment it will matter most. This is confirmed in the match against Sunshine City, where he's able to predict Isagi's final play, something that proves just how deeply he reads the game. But when Ryo is placed in a restricted environment, whether physically or emotionally, his performance collapses. At one point, he even came close to being eliminated from Blue Lock. In contrast, when he's given enough autonomy to act strategically, he creates legendary plays. Now let's move to the restricted or style ego. Unlike the free type, these shine when they face restrictions that force them to break and rebuild. They still aim to impact the world, but they do so inside or even against the limits that hold them. Michael Kaiser is the perfect embodiment of this. In the final match of the Neo Egoist League, he was cornered both physically and mentally, but instead of breaking, that restriction forced him to face his insecurities, reset his game, and rebuild from zero, using the pitch itself at his advantage. From that state, he scored one of the most powerful goals on the entire tournament. Another example could be Oliver Aiko. His restrictions come from the very start of his career. He dreamed of being a striker, but because of his exceptional field awareness, he was forced to play as a defender for the good of the team. And he proves over and over that his best version emerges in chaos. In the match against Japan's U20, Aiko was the one who stopped Rin's unpredictable sequences, showing that his highest performance doesn't appear in freedom, or in restriction. Now we move on the free self-style ego. This is a person who directs their goal according to their own criteria of value, guided by personal satisfaction, individual style, or subjective achievement. They don't necessarily care about global impact. What drives them is the joy of playing their way, and when they're free, their creativity explodes. Shiro Ryusei is the clear example. His game is entirely individualistic, guided by his own style and his own pleasure. Every move he creates comes from his desire to feel the highest thrill possible, and that creativity blooms in freedom or with a partner who grants him freedom. Megurbachi also belongs here. Since he was a child, he played by following his inner monster, directing his dream through his own style and desires. On the field, he often invents plays as if he were dancing, and those plays only appear when he has the freedom to let his creativity lead. And now we reach the last type, the restricted self-style ego. This type belongs to the person who still follows their own criteria of value, but their best version only appears in restriction. Limits either guide them or give them something to break through. Konigami Rensuke represents this perfectly. He has always been shown as a rigid, disciplined striker, but his true awakening came from frustration and resentment towards Shiro. He used a desire for revenge to stop Shiro for most of the match, and even provided an assist, proving that his best self appeared because of restriction. Barou Shoei also belongs to this category. His plays are always guided by his desires and his personal style, but his most devastating performances appear when he's restricted. We see it when Isagi manipulates him into exploding on the field, and again when Snuffy imposes a rigid system on him in yours. Every time, Barou breaks through those restrictions and delivers exceptional goals. In this way is how we can start identifying both our own type of ego and the types of others. But don't worry if you still feel unclear, because this framework isn't exclusive to Blue Lock. The same patterns show up in other characters who make it even clearer how the ego evolves depending on the world and the conditions they face. So let's go back to the free or style ego. A perfect example is Satoru Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen. Goju always sees the battlefield as a whole. He knows exactly how to shift the balance of the sorcerer world in his favor, and his power blooms when he's free, when he has enough space to unleash everything. The same applies to Kageyama from Haikyuu. Though he loves being a setter, he never hesitates to change his style if the team needs it. His awareness of the environment makes him a world style player, and his best plays appear in free environments. Now, for the restricted world style ego, Izuku Midoriya fits here. His own body is a restriction. Every time he used One for All freely, it shattered him. But it was that very restriction that pushed him to train harder and grow. And Deku doesn't fight only for himself. His dream is to become the #1 hero for the world. On the same side, we find Garou from One Punch Man. Garou studies every opponent, and more than that, he uses rankings and status to find worthy rivals. He reads his environment carefully and adapts, even when it means fighting in ways he doesn't prefer, and his greatest transformations always emerge under restriction, when he's pushed to break his limits again and again. As for the restricted self-styled ego, we have Maki Zenin, who was limited from childhood by being born without cursed energy. That restriction made her forge herself as a fighter in a way that benefited her personally, even if not for others. However, by destroying that restriction, she achieved her freedom, and at the same time, her best personal performance. The same happens with Shoto Todoroki. His rejection of his fire quirk, born from his trauma with his father, became a mental restriction. At first, he tried to be a hero on his own terms, even if it wasn't his full potential, but only when he accepted that part of himself did he surpass Midoriya and reveal his true power. And finally, the free self-style ego. Here we find Shoujo Hinata from Haikyuu. From the start, he played driven by his desire to fly. He wasn't focused on global strategies, he just wanted the personal joy of soaring. And while that desire sometimes made his goal harder to reach, whenever he was given freedom, Hinata showed his best self. The same applies to Mahito from Jujutsu Kaisen. He doesn't follow rules or structures. His joy lies in reshaping human bodies with total freedom. His purpose is terrifying, yes, but he still represents the pure free self-style ego, someone who seeks their own value in absolute autonomy, and whose best self emerges when he has complete freedom to create. Well, if after all of this you still don't know what type of ego you are, don't worry. In the comments I left a short test to help you figure it out, because what these characters teaches us isn't a magic recipe, it's a mirror. Different identities that show how the self acts according to what it values, and according to the environment that pushes it. Thanks to Isagi, we know that ego types aren't just cold theories, they're tools. Tools that don't lock you into one behavior, but give you a competitive edge. Tools that can turn decisions into victories. Because if you understand your ego type, you can design your routines, your teams, and even your battles, so that they ignore obstacles in your way, but the greatest weapon you can wield. So I hope you can use it wisely.